Study Buddy Homeschooling. In today's session, we'll be seeing Cbse Class 10 Chapter 6 Life Processes. We'll be seeing the topic Heterotrophic Nutrition. So what is meant by heterotrophs? Heterotrophs are organisms that cannot prepare their own food, and hence they depend on plants and other animals for their food. They lack chlorophyll molecules to prepare their own food. This heterotrophic nutrition is divided into Holozoic Nutrition, Parasitic Nutrition and Saprophytic Nutrition. Let's see what is Holozoic Nutrition. Holo means complete. So in the case of Holozoic Nutrition, the organism takes in the food completely. Most of the organisms follow Holozoic nutrition. Examples are human beings, animals, vertebrates, even Amoeba and Paramecium. What we do is we take in the food inside the body, and we have certain organs and organ systems in place which helps in breaking down of the food, taking the nutrients from the food and sending out the waste. So in Holozoic nutrition, where most of the organisms follow this method, the food is directly taken in. Next we have Parasitic Nutrition. In the case of parasitic nutrition, the organism depends on other organism for its food. For example, tapeworm is an example of parasitic nutrition. Tapeworm, when it lives in the human intestine, what happens is it takes the nutrients which is meant for that individual, and it deprives the individual of the energy, and hence the person becomes weak. So in this case, the parasite tapeworm is getting benefited and the host, that is the human being, is losing, and sometimes it can cause death to the individual. So in this case of parasitic nutrition, one organism is getting benefited and the organism from which this organism is taking the benefits is dying. Next we have Saprophytic Nutrition. Examples are fungi, yeast, etc., where they feed on the dead organic matter. What they do is they release certain enzymes and break down the dead organic matter, and the nutrients they get after decomposing, they take it in. Yeast, fungi and bread molds are examples of saprophytic nutrition, where they feed on the dead organic matter and take the nutrients from them. Now let's see nutrition in Amoeba and Paramecium. You can see the pictures of Amoeba and Paramecium. We know that both these are single-celled organisms, and just now we discussed that they follow Holozoic nutrition, where they completely swallow the food. Now let's see the example of Amoeba. What happens is Amoeba moves closely with its surface when it sees a food particle. Amoeba, we all know, it can change shapes. You can see them in different shapes because as it moves, it can change shapes, and as soon as it sees a food particle, it makes two finger-like projections by which it engulfs the food. As soon as it engulfs the food, a food vacuole is formed and digestive enzymes digest them out, and nutrients are absorbed and the waste materials are thrown out through the cell membrane. So it's a single cell that performs the function of taking in the food, digesting the food, assimilating the food, as well as in the egestion of the waste materials. This is Holozoic nutrition. Next we have Paramecium, which is a slipper shaped single cell microorganism. Throughout its body, it has finger-like projections or hair-like structures. What happens is as soon as it finds a food particle, it moves its body with the oral cavity, and with these hair-like structures it engulfs the food and it forms a food vacuole inside, just like amoeba, and the food is getting digested and food is assimilated as well. The nutrients are taken out and the waste materials are just thrown out through the membrane. So in both these cases, the single cell performs all the functions, and these two are examples of Holozoic nutrition. Now let's see the nutrition in human beings. We know that we follow Holozoic nutrition where we completely swallow the food. We have a digestive system in place. This is also known as alimentary canal, which does the function of breaking down the food, assimilation, absorption, as well as sending the waste out. So let's see the process of digestion right now. Digestion begins in the mouth. We'll have to remember that saliva, which is secreted by the salivary glands, plays a very important role and forms the beginning step of digestion. So the food gets mixed nicely with saliva here. Saliva contains a very important enzyme called salivary amylase. What this salivary amylase does is it breaks down starch into simple sugar. So the first step of breaking down of starch happens in the mouth itself. That's why we say we should not just swallow the food. We'll have to chew the food nicely with the saliva being mixed nicely. That helps in better digestion. So your first step of digestion begins in the mouth, where your saliva plays a very important role. Saliva contains an enzyme called salivary amylase. So the digestion first begins in mouth. So from the mouth, food moves into a tube-like structure called esophagus or food pipe. Esophagus is a long muscular tube-like structure. We have control only till we swallow the food. Beyond that, what happens we don't know. What exactly happens once the food reaches here is, at the beginning of esophagus is, since this esophagus is made up of muscles, these muscles contract rhythmically, causing certain movements known as peristaltic movements. Through these movements, the food is slowly pushed inside the stomach. So these peristaltic movements caused by the muscles of esophagus help in slowly pushing the food into the stomach. Remember that we don't have control here. We just have control till we swallow the food. Beyond that, the movement of food down to the stomach is being controlled by the muscles of the esophagus. From the esophagus, the food goes into the stomach. So once the food reaches the stomach, there are certain glands which are present in the walls of the stomach. These are the gastric glands. These secrete few substances. They are hydrochloric acid, that is HCl, pepsin and mucus. So these three, hydrochloric acid, pepsin and mucus, are secreted by the gastric glands which are present in the walls of the stomach. So what does each one does? Hydrochloric acid creates acidic environment. It's acid, right? So naturally it's going to create a acidic environment. Why is this acidic environment important? This acidic environment is important because pepsin, another enzyme which helps in the digestion of proteins, gets activated only in the acidic environment. So it's very important that acidity levels are maintained in the stomach for better digestion. Not only in maintaining the acidic environment, this HCl also kills any germs which are present in the food. And next we have pepsin. Pepsin, we know that, we just discussed that pepsin helps in the digestion of proteins. Proteins are broken down by pepsin. For this pepsin to be activated, acidic environment is important, which is provided by the hydrochloric acid or HCl. Next we have mucus. Mucus is nothing but the lining of the stomach. Why is this lining important? We all know that HCl is being secreted. HCl can be highly corrosive to the cells and can be very damaging. So what happens is mucus is secreted. It forms a protective layer around the stomach so that the stomach cells are not affected by the HCl. Instead, HCl will be acting only on the food, not on the stomach cells. So this mucus is very important. You would have heard about the term acidity. What happens is HCl is secreted whenever a person is hungry. That's why we say people should have whenever they are hungry. Otherwise, what happens if you don't provide food? The HCl which is secreted will start acting upon the stomach cells. It will first act on mucus, and beyond that it can even damage our stomach cells also. So that's why we should take food whenever we are hungry. You would have heard about the term acidity. That's because HCl is being secreted more and enough food is not being supplied. That's why we say we should take food on time. So now in the stomach what happens is proteins are broken down partially, and from there an acidic environment is created, and from there the food passes into small intestine. The passage of food from stomach into small intestine is controlled by a muscle called sphincter muscle. Small intestine is a thin, long, coiled tube compactly placed in our lower abdomen. This is a very important part of the digestive system where complete digestion of carbohydrates, proteins and fats happen. So this small intestine, which is a long coiled tube, receives its secretions from liver and pancreas. Pancreas produce pancreatic juice. Pancreatic juice works only in alkaline environment. But remember, the food which is coming from the stomach is full of acidic environment. So it is very important to make the food into alkaline. That's where liver comes to play. Liver secretes bile juice which makes the food alkaline, and as well as it acts on the fats as well. Bile salts, which is again secreted by liver, breaks larger fat molecules into smaller ones. If the fat molecules are much larger, it is very difficult for the enzymes to act upon them. So these larger fat molecules are broken down into smaller fat molecules so that the enzymes can act very easily, because there will be more surface of fats which is going to be exposed for the enzymes. This process is known as emulsification. So liver secretes bile juice and bile salts. Bile juice makes the food acidic, so that it makes the food alkaline, so that pancreatic juice can act on them, and bile salts breaks the larger fat molecules into smaller fat molecules, which is known as emulsification. We discussed that pancreatic juice needs an alkaline environment for the enzymes to work. So what are the enzymes which are produced by the pancreatic juice? They are trypsin and lipase. Trypsin acts on the proteins and breaks them down into amino acids, and lipase acts on the emulsified fats. And you have the walls of small intestine secrete intestinal juice. So trypsin is there, lipase is there, and intestinal juice is there. All these three act upon the food in the small intestine and completely break them down, where proteins are broken down into amino acids, carbohydrates into glucose, and fats into fatty acid and glycerol. So complete breakdown of food happens in the small intestine with the help of these enzymes, trypsin, lipase and intestinal juice. Trypsin, you have to remember, it acts on proteins, lipase on fat molecules, and intestinal juice, all of these act on the proteins, carbohydrates and fats and break them down completely into amino acids, glucose and fatty acid and glycerol. The inner wall of small intestine are supplied with small finger-like projections. There are millions of small finger-like projections called villi. These are very important in absorption of the nutrients. So the small intestine, all the complex carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, they are all broken down into amino acids, glucose and fatty acids and glycerol. So they are in a very simpler form. It will be absorbed by villi. What are villi? They are small finger-like projections which are present throughout the small intestine. So basically they take out all the nutrients, they absorb all the nutrients. And the beauty of villi is that they are supplied with blood vessels, very thin blood vessels. Villi are completely surrounded by thin blood vessels. So from the villi, the absorbed nutrients enters the bloodstream. So once it enters the bloodstream, the nutrients are taken into the different parts of the body wherever they are needed, either for energy or maintenance or repair. For different functions, the nutrients enter the bloodstream from villi. These villi are very, very important. So now there will be some undigested food left in the small intestine. From small intestine, the undigested food goes into the large intestine. Here you can see the structure here. It is much more broader than the small intestine and it's quite a small tube compared to small intestine. So in the large intestine, absorption of water happens. So the cells of the large intestine, they are lined with number of bacteria which absorb the water, and the dry waste is pushed out through the anus, which is controlled by anal sphincter. So this is how digestion happens in human beings. It begins with mouth and ends with anus. For any queries and clarification, contact us at studybuddyhomeschooling@gmail.com. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our channel, and if you have any doubts, please leave your comments in the comment section. We'll get back to you. Thank you.